Stream 1 to the proposed Wairarapa District Plan. My name is David McMahon and I'm the chair of this hearings panel, which is comprised of a number of members, both councillors sitting as commissioners and iwi representatives also sitting as representatives. Just for the record, we'll start with some introduction of fellow panel members.
Robin Cherry Campbell, Commissioner, Carterton District Councillor and Deputy Chair.
Hello everybody, Brian Dello, Carterton District Councillor and Commissioner. Thank you.
Ko Ananaya Sims, Toka Ingoa, representative for Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa Hearings Commissioner. Kia ora.
Nui te mihi atu kia koutou te mawhi mato, ko Joanne Hayes Toka Ingoa. I'm the representative for Rangitane iwi.
Thank you. Alistair Plummer, South Wairarapa District Council and Commissioner.
Kia ora, Brian Jefferson, appointed by the South Wairarapa District Council as Commissioner.
Kia ora, Fraser Marman, Commissioner appointed by the Marsden District Council.
Kia ora, Craig Lawyer, Commissioner and Marsden District Council.
Thank you, everybody. And just for the record, and particularly for those that are online, and I'll come to you in a minute, the council officers that are in the room.
Cool. Hamish Wesley, Reporting Officer for Strategic Direction, Tangata Whenua and Procedural Matters.
Katie Treadle, Reporting Officer for the whole plan topic.
Kia ora, ko Solitaire Robertson Toku Ingoa. I am the reporting officer for 2 of the Section 42A reports in this stream and the Planning and Regulatory Manager at Carterton District Council.
Thank you. I'm conscious there are other people in the room and we'll come to you in due course. On day 1 of the hearing, I talked about some of the procedural matters leading to these hearings, the approach that we're taking to these hearings in terms of trying to keep things reasonably informal but structured. I don't intend to repeat those matters today. They're on the record. I would say that these proceedings are being recorded and the recording will be uploaded onto the web page at the end of each day. And I know that from feedback, we've seen day 1 of the proceedings, so that's there already. Okay, we have a fairly full day today, some 15 submitters to hear from, and I think we'll move straight to the first submitter, which is the Office of the Trustee. Not hear any of that. Yeah, probably. Sorry. Good morning. Do we have Nicholas Cooper and Dr. Charlotte Severn with us?
Kia ora. Yes, it's myself, Nicholas Cooper, speaking on behalf of Dr. Charlotte Severn, the Māori Trustee.
Welcome, Mr. Cooper. Sorry you've only just been admitted. I just made a general introduction of myself and the panel and the procedures. You probably missed that.
Yes.
That's okay. Just very briefly, we were welcoming everybody and explaining the procedures that we're operating under. And I was just saying that these proceedings are being recorded. This is day 2 of the Strategic Directions hearing. Day 1 was on Tuesday. Yeah. And recording for the proceedings are online. I'm not sure whether you've had an opportunity to have a look at that all at this point, Mr. Cooper.
No, I haven't.
That's fine. There's certainly no penalty or prize for having seen that. We have a copy of your speaking notes, and I'd invite you to take us through those either in full or just if you want to highlight the main points, and then we'll see what questions we have. You've got 15 minutes allocated for your presentation.
Okay, so that's the statement dated 7th of August?
Yes, it is.
Great, okay. Yes, so I've just got some speaking notes to that statement that summarises, so I'll just read that off if that's okay.
Please do.
Great, thank you. Tēnā koutou, my name is Nicholas Cooper and I appear on behalf of the Māori Trustee, Dr. Charlotte Severn. I am a Mātanga Tai Pakeke Rawa Taio Resource and Environmental Specialist at Te Tumu Paeroa, the Office of the Māori Trustee, based in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington. Dr. Severn thanks the hearing panel for the opportunity to speak to the Māori Trustees' submission points relevant to hearing stream 1 for the proposed Wairarapa Combined District Plan. We have assumed that our original submission dated 19th of December 2023 and a further statement that you have with you that was provided on the 7th of August is taken as read, and I will focus on highlighting the Māori Trustees' key points in our written statement. The Māori Trustee wishes to firstly acknowledge Rangatane o Wairarapa and Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa as mana whenua of this rohi. In preparing our submission position, the Māori Trustee has engaged with mana whenua representatives, and we believe that they are not opposed to the wording for the proposed definitions for papakainga and Māori land. The proposed definitions maintain that papakainga is for those who whakapapa to Rangatane o Wairarapa or Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa. This is in keeping with the officer's report recommendations. The Māori Trustee is concerned that the officer's report has not addressed her submission points regarding the definition of papakainga and a new definition of Māori land. The Māori Trustee is interested to understand the position of Council in relation of the hearing panel in relation to these definitions, as no recommendations or comments were provided in the officer's report. Māori landowners within the rohi will almost certainly whakapapa to Rangatane o Wairarapa and Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa, but may not be registered members. However, their whakapapa connection to their lands has been confirmed by a succession order of the Māori Land Court. There is no reason why owners of Māori land within the rohi should be potentially excluded from the same consenting pathways to develop papakainga simply because they are not registered members of the iwi. The Māori Trustee considers a definition of Māori land is needed to ensure consistency across the proposed plan. The definition that has been proposed, which is in Appendix 1 of the statement, encompasses those who whakapapa to Rangatane o Wairarapa or Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa and Māori freehold landowners. The proposed amendment to the definition of papakainga is consistent with ensuring recognition of those who whakapapa to Rangatane o Wairarapa or Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa, while providing for the development aspirations of owners of Māori freehold land. In terms of the Māori Trustee's submission point on the issue of building resilience for Māori freehold landowners in relation to climate change adaptation or retreat processes, we are uncertain that the officer's report recommendation is within the scope of the proposed plan. The MPZ chapter does not contain any reference to climate change and does not address the issue of building resilience for Māori freehold landowners in relation to climate change adaptation or retreat processes. The Māori Trustee would welcome guidance from the panel to understand that addressing the issue of building resilience for Māori freehold landowners in relation to climate change adaptation or retreat processes can be addressed within the MPZ chapter. Finally, the Māori Trustee considers that the inclusion of ecosystem services as part of the strategic objective NE06 is consistent with a holistic view of a healthy ecosystem, of which biological diversity forms a part. The inclusion of ecosystem services is aligned with a Māori worldview and could enable more participation by Māori in local government and increase the quality of decision making for resource management. This is consistent with the policy direction under current national policy statements, such as the NPS for Indigenous biodiversity. Once again, the Māori Trustee thanks the panel for the opportunity to speak to these issues and is happy to take questions if the panel has any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper, for that very succinct and clear summary. I'll just check with my panel members as to whether there are any questions arising. Am I right? No.
Not at the moment, no.
Anyone on my left? People, I have a couple of questions for you. The first relates to the first issue about the definition of Māori land and papakainga. And you pointed out that in your reading of the officer's report, the latter matter, the definition of Maori land, doesn't seem to have been addressed. Is that your understanding?
Yes, there was no reference to our submission point about a definition for Māori land in the officer's 42A report on strategic direction or in the interpretations officer's report.
Yes. Can you confirm to the panel that the submission from the Murray trustee did in fact address that matter and request a definition in the original submission?
In our submission, if you have the full submission from December, it is on 1, 2, counting the pages, 3, 4.
Yes, I do have that full submission in front of me on my laptop.
Yeah.
So on page 5, which is named page 5 of 50, under paragraph 9.
Right. Yes, at the bottom there. Okay.
Requested definite amendments to Papakanga, the Papakanga definition, and the inclusion of a new definition for Māori land.
Just bear with me, and I'll just check with the officers, Mr. Wesley or Ms. Robertson. Can you confirm that your reports don't address that definition? Yes. Okay.
That's correct. And as Ms. Robertson highlighted in her 40-day report for this first hearing, it only contains the definition, submissions on the definitions which apply across the whole plan.
Yes.
Their definitions relate to a particular topic or better sit with a particular topic. So for these two, Papakanga and Māori land, they've been allocated to the Māori purpose zone hearing. So they have been missed in the sense of not in today's report.
Yes.
They will be in the Māori purpose zone report.
Yep. Are you hearing that explanation, Mr. Cooper?
Yes. May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Certainly.
That these definitions for Papakanga and Māori land, we don't believe they apply only to the Māori purpose zone because it is possible for people to undertake Papakanga development outside of the Māori purpose zone, unproposed plan or under the current plan. So we believe that these definitions should be covered under the interpretation definitions section of the proposed plan and should be covered under the current hearing stream 1.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. Regardless of where they are dealt with, I can give you an assurance that they will be dealt with. Your position, both in your original submission on page 5 and in your speaking notes today, make it very clear what the definition should be, and I can give you the assurance that the matter will be dealt with in a future hearing stream. I'm not just sure which hearing stream it will be. I'm looking at Mr. Wesley.
Māori purpose zone.
Yes, but that will be later. It'll be next year, won't it?
No, that's hearing 4.
Hearing 4 in December. October. The hearing 4 in October, that definitely will be dealt with. There's no need for you to attend and repeat that unless you want to. But I'll leave that in your hands. But you can be assured that the report for hearing stream 4 will address those definition matters.
Thank you.
And also with the benefit of having seen your position on that in advance of preparing the report. So you're probably in a unique situation in that sense. As to the other 2 points regarding the strategic objectives, particularly in relation to climate change, you would maintain that the relief sought in relation to objective 5 of CCR, as outlined in your original submission, should be adopted by the panel. That's your position?
Our position is that we are uncertain that within the scope of the Māori purpose zone that can be covered because there's been no analysis, discussion or setting out of climate change and resilience as an issue for the Māori purpose zone. Okay. So we are uncertain as to whether that's that can occur without sort of another kind of plan notification process occurring. If it is, we would be happy for the wording to be incorporated in the Māori purpose zone.
Okay. I'll just make a note of that. Mr. Wesley, who's the reporting officer on the Murray Purpose Zone? Is it yourself? Yeah. Okay, you've made a note of that. Okay, and then the final matter related to the strategic direction, objectives relating to the natural environment, and particularly NE 06, Mr. Cooper. And the issue there is an inclusion of the term ecosystem services. I'm just not sure what your position there. Are you supporting that inclusion of that term, or are you opposed to it?
We support the inclusion of ecosystem services alongside biodiversity as the subject of that objective, because we believe that a healthy ecosystem is supported by ecosystem services in addition to, and that supports biological diversity. And that represents a better, more rounded, holistic viewpoint, which is consistent with a Māori worldview, in terms of them recognising that the environment needs to be in balance and the intrinsic sort of values of nature.
Yes. Would there, if the panel was of a mind to run with that, would there, in your view, be a need for a definition of ecosystem services as a consequential amendment?
Potentially. I mean, there is a lot of research out there about what is considered ecosystem services, and I think that did come up in the Greater Wellington Regional Council's Plan Change 1 hearing stream on their ecology stream.
The reason I asked that question, Mr. Cooper, is you said that the inclusion of that term would be consistent with the intent of the Local Government Act 2002. Does the Local Government Act grapple with that concept and define it in any way?
It does not define ecosystem services, but at that point was in terms of the Local Government Act provides for enabling the active participation of Māori in decision making.
Yes.
And in our view, providing for inclusion of ecosystem services makes the objective more resonate better with Māori and would build participation.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of the concept, you're citing the Local Government Act, but in terms of the term, you're pointing to how the regional policy statement Plan Change number 1 might assist in an understanding of that concept.
I believe it would.
Okay, thank you.
I believe our submission point was supported by Greater Wellington as a further submission.
Okay. Just before that's all the questions I have, Mr. Cooper. Just before we let you go, just looking at the officers through me, are there any points of clarification that you have for the submitter? No. The answer is no. So that clearly they fully understand what you're saying, Mr. Cooper. I'll just check with the panel. Yes. One further question.
So Cooper, Joe Hayes, if you can see me on the screen. Highly productive land overlay, you comment around highly productive land overlay going over to MPZ over MPZ area. Would you like to kind of elaborate a little bit further on that?
I can, if that's okay. I understood that the comment in the report around the overlay was that it would be addressed within the MPZ zone hearing stream. But in our view, the highly productive land overlay should not apply to the MPZ because it makes it clear in the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land that that would not apply to Māori, to non-rural land.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We understand the point you're making. The HPL is very directive in that sense.
Yes.
It's been assisted by a recent case of the Environment Court in Nelson, which makes it clear that to be highly productive land in the interim period before the Regional Council defines that through the Regional Policy Statement, The two components must be a LUC category of 1, 2 or 3 and rural productive land. So I understand what you're saying there. But we'll revisit that matter in the MPZ zone and probably in the rural zone. So, Mr. Cooper. Yeah, any further?
Nope.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. That's been a very clear and succinct statement. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Chair, and the hearing panel, and good luck with the rest of your submission hearings.
Yes, we may see you back on the Murray Purpose Zone and later in the year.
I'll definitely be watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got it.
Thanks.
Morning, Mr. Workman.
Morning.
How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you.
Good. Just before we start, one of the commissioners would like to just make a disclosure.
That's for Marama.
Yes. Oh, it's not for you. Is it for you? Oh, sorry, for Brian. Sorry, Brian.
Kia ora, Workman. I'm Brian Della. I am a property owner on leasehold land at Kawakawandi 2 Trust, as you probably realise, and also a committee member of the Ngawi Ratepayers Association.
Yes.
David, I think I need to explain, although Kim knows, but I do boundary Kawakawa, and I'm also on the ratepayers.
Yes. These are disclosures, Mr. Workman, that the panel make regularly. We keep a register of interests on the webpage, and that's not to say that there are conflicts of interest. Are you happy for both commissioners to be present and to ask any questions?
Absolutely. They'll be able to correct me if I make them.
I'm going to.
And we're also members of, as I say, yes,
But you understand we have to ask that question.
I understand. I know it'd be great to have their local knowledge and input.
We have a written statement from you. Do you wish to take us through that?
I'll just take it through it. It just occurred to me yesterday, after reading the Māori trustees submission, that it was a very natural flow on in terms of the way they perceived the owners of Māori land and the repeated recommendations around that. I wanted to start off with saying that in our second submission, we were really pleased with the advance that had been made on the earlier documentation, and it gave us something to work with. It did demonstrate a greater appreciation of the relationship between Māori land, owners of Māori land, their whenua, and also the local government. Having read the submission, in our original submission, as owners of Māori land, we were not included as tangata whenua. We were not involved or consulted about sites of significance to Māori, and making the point that Kawakawa 1D2 is a significant piece of land. It's unusual in that the original owner of that land was Hemi Te Miha, a sole owner, and all the beneficiaries are descendants of Hemi Te Miha, which puts quite a burden on us to ensure that the mauri or the mana of Hemi Te Miha and his ancestors are honoured in the way we conduct our business. The other issue for us was that we read everything we could and did quite a bit of research, but we're still not certain about the accuracy and validity of the information gathered around the sites and areas of significance. And in a way, we tested that in our second submission because on our land there's a significant Waihi Tapu site, the Punariku Lagoon, which has not been included. And so one of the things we did in our second submission was to seek inclusion. The Maori Trustees submission for us goes some way to answering a lot of our concerns. And Dr. Severn posited that the owners of Maori land were tangata whenua. And right throughout, when they were addressing the sites and areas of significance to Māori, they made the point that should relate to the owners of Maori land. And if that is, agreed to, it means that, and I've outlined a number of things that will advantage us in a way, being able to work with us in accordance with tikanga Māori to identify and schedule sites and areas of significance, to enable the maintenance, repair and restoration of sites and areas of significance, support the owners of Māori land to protect and maintain sites and areas of significance, protect the cultural, spiritual and historical values of importance, allow specified activities on the land which will not compromise cultural, spiritual or historical values. And then the last three, which are important. And the reason is that when the first letter came out to the ratepayers of Ngāwai, it received a pretty negative response, and I could understand that. And one of the things that the response from the ratepayers pointed out was that it could very well aggravate relationships between the owners of Maori land and local people. And so those last three areas encourage engagement with owners of Maori land where activities have the potential to adversely affect sites or areas of significance, promote the provision or development of access by owners of Maori land, and finally to promote informal arrangements or understandings between landowners and local tangata whenua owners of Maori land, iwi, hapu or marae. This is important to us. We rely on good relationships to survive, and Ngāwai is not an easy community to have good relationships with. It's diverse and there's all sorts of characters, including, of course, the two that I'm speaking to at the moment. We proposed, we talked with Kawakawa Station, our neighbours, who have a significant Waihi Tapu site, Wairarapa, which is on their land. They look, can you help us to honour, the intent of Waihi Tapu? Teach us what it means. How do we acknowledge that? And what are the sorts of things that we should do in order to not infringe or impact adversely on the Waihi Tapu? We've had a 40-year relationship with that station. They lease our land and have done so for the last 40 years. And so what we're doing now is to working together to develop a memorandum of understanding about the protection of Wairarapa, not only on their land, but on our land. And our intent is that if we can use the framework under Schedule 4, and we have some questions about that, we could then develop a memorandum of understanding that might in fact be an appendix to any future leasing arrangements. We see the potential. I mean, I think that sort of relationship can really be only achieved at a local level. It can't be achieved that easily by iwi entities, rangitane or pahununu, who have got enough to do battling with central government rather than worrying too much about what happens at the local government level. And we think that the owners of Māori land could play a significant role in developing those relationships. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Workman. I'll just see whether there are any questions starting on my right. Nothing?
Oh.
Yes, right.
And thank you. Just one question. The sites of significance are basically in a block general area. Do you think that they need to be more defined and more specific to get the buy-in of the people on the coast?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've had some difficulty with that because as this work has progressed, the definitions of what comprises a Wairarapa seem to have shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And just to give you an example of that, in 1988 Gumbley report, which is at I think Appendix D of our initial submission, Gumbley identified 274 sites South Wairarapa, and his report was commissioned by the South Wairarapa District Council, and he said, well, if you want to bring them up to the standard of Resource Management Act, that would require you to cough up $175,000. Well, that didn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it was dropped and nothing else happened. The recent mapping exercise identified 100 sites. So, and I think the reason for that is they were defined differently. Up under that definition, there were 12 sites on Kawakawa 1D2 and 19 sites Kawakawa Station. Well, under the latest rendition, there are no sites identified on Kawakawa 1D2, and I think only one on Kawakawa Station.
Site.
So it's a moving feast. And it seems to me that there needs to be a more nuanced conversation. I understand that, is it hearing stream 5?
Yes, and
dealing with Wairarapa?
yes, and we'll get into that nuanced conversation there.
I'm so pleased. Yes, we need to have that.
Yes.
Have that.
This is more of a high level. We're dealing with strategic direction.
Yes, I
Yes, Councillor. Commissioner Plummer.
Mr. Workman, thank you. You raised a really interesting philosophical question there. So this is a plan that is quite prescriptive.
Yes.
Is this the right place that this particular topic should even be in? If it's a moving feast, and as we go along this journey, every day is going to be a different outcome. when you've got something as prescriptive as this, it seems to be almost working against the very intent of what we're trying
But I
to do.
don't think you can prescribe it now. I think you'll find that every whānau and hapu will define what they mean by wahi tapu differently. And they will, also the areas will be differently defined. I mean, we would say that there are a number, I think something like 18 middens in one area. Do you define that as 18 middens or do you define it as a wahi tapu site?
Yeah.
Now, we have to have those conversations.
And again, we will have those in the future hearing.
Yes.
Mr. Whitman, I can give you that assurance.
We've got some difficulties there.
But so I suppose my question is, from your submission and your perspective, you're, you'd make a recommendation that there's more work to be done on this.
Yes.
We're obviously at the stage now that we're doing the hearings about the plan. That's why I raise the point and say, is this the appropriate document in which this should be covered? I know statutorily we have to put something.
Yes.
But when we go down the idea of specifically identifying, we're never going to get them all in this document. And therefore, tomorrow, when we say this document's right, it's wrong.
Yes.
So that's from
Well, I
your
think-
perspective, would you say this is, we just keep it at a very high level and do something in a different way to identify rather than in the plan?
I think it needs to be covered in a general frame, and then with later in terms of specificity, because it will start defining what wahi tapu back to whānau. They'll put you right pretty quickly, and you don't want too many of those arguments. We need to carefully think about how we have these conversations. I think it might be more appropriate for Māori to work through those issues in their own forums and to come up with something that they are comfortable with, rather than engage with with the South Wairarapa District Council or whoever and have a debate about it. I don't think that would be particularly helpful.
Okay. Just conscious of time.
Yes, I just had a quick one, but you actually answered it, Mr. Wingman. It was, have you considered expanding the relationship with the locals? And you've actually answered that.
We want to, and one of the thoughts we had was, after we've done this work, to hold a meeting with the local landowners, ratepayers, and describe what we've done and what the issues are to get a better understanding. Now, our experience has been, once you explain to people why, we have, like in our leases, we have a condition that you're not allowed to excavate the land. And the reason for that is because our people buried their deceased independently, individually. So there are bodies all over Ngāwi, and what we ask our tenants is not to excavate, because you might dig them up. Once the lessees understood that, I don't think we did a good job explaining why that or that condition was there. If we had done that, I think it would have been a lot better for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Whitman, just before you go, the focus of this hearing's on the tangata whenua and on some strategic directions, which also include a tangata whenua objective.
Right.
Are there any particular changes over and above what you've concluded in your summary statement that you're requesting the panel make in relation to that chapter or those objectives?
I think there were some comments that we made. One of the things that we noted was that there was a definition of Kahungunu ki Wairarapa and their trust, Rangitane and their trust, but it excluded Kahungunu ki Wairarapa, which is a entity in its own right and was there before the post-settlement trust.
Right.
Now, I think since then it's been included in that, hasn't it?
Yes, Mr. Wesney's made.
Yeah, and it was those sorts of omissions that, we weren't very happy about.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you for your attendance, and we'll no doubt see you sometime in early December.
Oh, we're
hearing
on it
five.
right away.
Just put it in your diary, the 9th to the 13th of December.
Yes,
It's hearing string 5. I've been reliably informed by my deputy chair.
thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I must see you all have the second knee in place.
Oh, you'll be running
You'll
it.
have to bring me in on the,
See the bionic man.
in on the stretcher.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do it.
I'm different. That's Nathan. Cool. Welcome to the East Lee representatives. Marshall, welcome.
Kia ora koutou.
And you've got Mrs. Foster with you. Welcome, Mrs. Foster. Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, it very occasionally cuts out, but most of the time it's fine. So I think we're fine.
I'll just encourage everyone to speak up. We've got microphones spotted around the room, Mr. Marshall, but some people's voices are not perhaps as loud as others.
Okay. Well, thank you for hearing us. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. So I believe you will have received my legal submissions in advance, as well as some evidence from Ms. Foster. The key points for Eastleigh on this hearing topic are the objectives RE02 and RE03. So I just propose to let Ms. Foster speak to those in terms of her evidence, and then if we have time at the end of our slot, I could perhaps talk to you about the the matter regarding referencing of the definitions, which I understood was discussed at a previous session. But I'd like to just focus our submissions on those two objectives. So
yes, you're correct. Day one of the hearing was on Tuesday, and we heard from Ms. Robertson, and she referenced your legal submissions that were pre-circulated and outlined that her change of thinking in relation to the referencing matter. So,
right. Yeah, and I understood there was one outstanding question there, but I would like to focus on the others first and then get to that if we have some time.
Okay, that's fine. Let's move to you, Ms. Foster. Thank you for your pre-circulated evidence, and only just been handed up now a copy of your speaking notes. So can I just invite you to take us through those speaking notes and so we can get a feel for the issues?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Very clearly.
Yes. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, ko Christine Foster, tōku ingoa. Thank you for that introduction, Joshua. My apologies for not being there in person. Mr. Chairman will know that I part of the time do live in the Wairarapa, but today I am not able to attend in person, so apologies for that. So I will just read very briefly. It's a brief statement because the particular issues we took up through my evidence have largely been well understood and accepted, I think, by the officers. So just a very brief statement to you. I won't read one. I'll start at 2.1, if that's all right.
Yes.
This is an update following review of Mr. Wesney's and Ms. Robinson's summary statements for the hearing. So the outstanding matters might have been objective RE2 about productive capacity. The issue raised in my evidence was that the wording of the objective limits the use of all land in the rural environment to primary production. Mr. Wesney has adopted my suggested wording, which he agrees better reconciles the slightly different purposes of the two objectives RE02 and 03. He proposes inserting subdivision as well as use and development to capture the full range of subdivision use and development that has the potential to impact on productive capacity. I support that suggested amendment, and I set out below his amendment from his summary statement and endorse that. In 2.2, I reflect on RE03. Mr. Wesney proposed amendments that that I had proposed for Eastleigh. The point being really that for highly productive land, the NPS does not prohibit non-productive uses of highly productive land. It requires protection of them from inappropriate subdivision use and development. So picking up that suggestion, I think, will better reflect the reality of the NPS. In 2.3, the objective for urban form 01, the Eastleigh submission had requested that the smaller settlements and coastal settlements where Eastleigh has land at Riversdale be acknowledged, and Mr. Wesney has proposed to make that change. He has also made some changes in response to the Greater Wellington Regional Council submission that Mrs. Zollner will speak to you about this morning, I think, and Eastleigh is comfortable with those. It's a very small point, but I've just, for clarification, it's noted that clause 2 of that objective should be shown as an amendment made in Mr. Wesney's section 42A report. It wasn't in the publicly notified, but Eastleigh is grateful for that suggestion and hope that it carries with you. And Ms. Robinson in 2.4 had picked up Eastleigh's suggestion of a new definition for development capacity, and Eastleigh is comfortable with that wording. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but essentially that's thank you to the officers for listening.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Foster. I'll kick off because I've just got a couple, and then we'll see whether there's anything further. My only question really relates to objective RE03, paragraph 2.2.
Yes.
And I just wonder whether the word subdivision should also be inserted into that in the same way that it has been for RE02.
Oh, good point. Yes, it probably should. Yes.
Apart from that, I don't have anything further. I'll just check with the panel. Getting a clear no, Foster, so I would suggest that,
thank you.
That everything's fine. That leaves you, Mr. Marshall, to perhaps talk to the legal point that you referenced earlier.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Foster, for that. I just might mention that, totally agree regarding the point on subdivision there for objective RE03, that it would be appropriate to include subdivision in there. So just cutting to the point about the cross references in the definitions. Now, this was it's quite a technical point, and it's a point about usability. I understand that the reporting officer is in agreement on this. And just to capture it, essentially the point is that when the plan is notified and made, that those definitions are fixed in time at that point and will change and will not change unless they are amended through a plan change process, even if the document from which they are derived is amended. And so as a plan user, particularly acknowledging that some plan users aren't people who use plans every day, it could be confusing if you have a cross-reference to a plan that has been amended and they're not clear which version is authoritative, with the reality being it's the version in the district plan which remains authoritative until it is amended. I understand the one matter that remains sort of up in the air on that is whether it is appropriate to have cross-references for definitions that are incorporated from the national planning standards. Correct. Now, my understanding of the law is that essentially the national planning standards sit in the same camp as a national policy statement, in that they make directions which then have to be incorporated into the regional and district plans. But if the national planning standards are amended in the future, my understanding is that those amendments aren't automatically incorporated into the regional and district plans. It's possible that they might be directed to, that the local councils might be directed to make amendments without the Schedule 1 process.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen, but in any case, an amendment is still required. So from my view, there shouldn't be an exception made for the national planning standards. Perhaps there could just be an indication, perhaps by colour coding or something like that about which definitions are, mandatory national planning standard definitions. But in my view, it is still a potential source of confusion if you have a document which says this is the definition and that's taken from the national planning standards, which then someone picks up, sees an inconsistency and not sure where to run with it.
Yes.
You don't propose to go into that anymore. This is about making sure that this plan for the general public is going to be as clear as possible. So unless you have any questions, those are my submissions on that.
No, Mr. Marshall, you make the point very well. It was the only matter that Ms. Robertson was suggesting she might have another think about. She'll cover off that matter in her right of reply, and that'll be in the next 10 to 15 days. Your position's very clear, and we understand the point about the national planning standards, whether we don't want to second guess what the government might do in terms of making a regulation that forces council or whether it's for a first scheduled process. So I think Ms. Robertson's very, very clear on that matter. Unless there's anything further, thank you for your attendance, both Mr. Marshall and Foster. We'll see you, Ms. Foster, later in the day in relation to another submitter.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to the council officer as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.
Yes.
Just while we're waiting for the next submitter, that's Kirsten Brown. Let me just shuffle a few papers. Yeah. Welcome, Ms. Brown. Thank you for your handout. I don't know whether this is day 2 of the hearings. I don't know if you had a chance to catch up with the recordings for day 1.
I have not. I've been
Been busy.
very,
That's fine. There's no penalty imposed for not watching. It's not prime time viewing.
For me, it is prime time. And I have to say, I so appreciate being in this room with everyone here, and including, the previous submitters, sitting in the same air as Kim Workman is a privilege as well. So, this is new for me. So bear with me.
Well, and please don't feel intimidated by what's an extremely long table.
Well, there are some friendly faces at this table, so I'm okay.
I'm going to invite you to either read through or take it through the main points. So we've allocated 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You can get through that.
So kia ora koutou for Kirsten Brown, tōku ingoa. I'm just going to go right in and say I've been a Masterton citizen in the town centre for 18 years. It's the longest time I've ever lived anywhere. I've developed a deep love of the potential of my place. And that's what's led me to this room today. So I'm going to read a little bit of this because in the interest of the 15-minute thing, I need to make sure I'm concise, but I might float off a little bit. So please don't read with me.
What I encourage you to do is.
Okay,
Give us-
I'm going to start with this.
What I would encourage you to do is give us a clear direction.
Okay.
Any changes that you want,
Yes.
decisions you want this panel to.
I will do that.
Yes.
I promise you that. Bear with me a little bit to give you a little background here. First of all, I read and I support Micah Zollner's Hearing Stream 1 submission. So, yep, I've noted that on here. I wanted to talk a little bit about me, who I am. I'm not like anyone else who will come in here to speak with you. I'm not a professional planner. I'm not a professional at this. I'm submitting as a professional regenerative designer. So a designer seeks the potential of any design tool, seeks what added value can happen through that tool. That's what I'm looking for here. In my background, 2 years ago, I returned to university to study regenerative design, particularly through a spatial design lens, and did that under a research area named Design for Public Good, Toiarea at Massey University. I produced a Master of Design with distinction, and it was all about our place, my place, Whakaoreore, Masterton. It was about how it currently develops and how it might develop in the future. And a huge central pillar in that was what I discovered about our district plan and the effect that it has on our place, on our places. I'm currently training with Regenesis, which is a USA-based regenerative development and design institute connected to the Tauranga Moana Civic Precinct Project through that institute. I'm an active member of Sustainable Wairarapa. My part in Sustainable Wairarapa is particularly focused on our ecological corridors, our urban ecological corridors. I'm not going to go into the rest of that stuff, an example in there. I'm going to say that I really loved what was being set up here. Most people are consumers of the district plan. They don't actually realise that our places are designed, but in this room they're being designed. So this is high stakes for me, and I think for our places. Okay. Sam Ludden was to be here with me, but he unfortunately had to go to a different thing. So I do have a strategic question because this is that hearing stream, and my strategic question is, why does our township's ongoing, I'm speaking of Masterton in particular, why does our township's ongoing development keep undermining its ecological infrastructure when our strategic intent is to conserve and reinstate it? I'm talking about the effect that we see every day in our place, despite things like district plans asking for it not to be dismantled. So I'm going to use today the urban stream example to illustrate my strategic direction questions, chiefly how our ecological infrastructure might be reflected in our definitions, our natural environment chapter, and our urban form and development chapters, all of which are within the scope of this hearing. So what I've done is I've looked really carefully at the district plan and picked out a reasoning pathway as a consumer of my place. So how would I go through the district plan to understand why the stream next to my house isn't being looked after ecologically? So that came to a specific question, and that's, what is the ecological management ascribed to the rivers and streams, or eco corridors, that run through Masterton's town centre zone and will be affected by urban form and development? So it does stray outside a little bit, the strategic direction chapter. but that's in order to bring it back to questions regarding the strategic direction chapter. I will, as a designer and looking for potential and not a planner, I'm going to pose my suggestions, if you like, as questions to the panel. So I'm going to ask questions of our planners. I'm not going to tell them what to do because I'm not a planner and I can't write these things, they can. All right. Yeah, so the first thing I found is that that the Planners Note 81 from Centres Zones Hearing 2 suggests that the natural character chapter is where we should go for all objectives, policy and rules for town centre streams. So I quote in here that the district plan guidance, the national policy statement, district plan guidance directs councils to manage natural environment values through natural environment chapters rather than through area-specific zone frameworks, like, for example, town centre zones. The natural character chapter contains specific objectives, policies and rules that the planner considers adequately provide for the management of rivers in the context of a district plan. So this chapter is not in the strategic direction, but it directly does address streams, and it categorises them as either surface or significant water bodies. I have this one right here. That's what it looks like for the people. Nice short one. Oh, quite nice. Okay, so surface water bodies. So in this chapter, they do have values described, but they don't appear on any online map layer or any schedule. They're not listed. It includes water races and artificial surface water bodies, which to me risks case by case identification. They can be mistaken for drains and they might not be considered drains by others. Significant water bodies, a few of these are named in Masterton's part of the schedule, and some of their values are ascribed in Schedule 11. So we have Schedule 11 here, significant water bodies, and all three councils have submitted their schedules of named water bodies. There's no meaningful online map layer showing these water bodies. I'm going to suggest that's because Land Information New Zealand doesn't have those water bodies on its maps. Those are the base maps that we all go to, and those maps cannot see our significant water bodies. A lot of it because they're hiding behind houses or inside pipes now. Okay, so when I go to the natural character chapter, for me, I have questions about whether this will be more effective. So the first question is, the surface or significant water body today is not on a schedule, not on the map, and is habitually treated as a drain. Is the rule permitted maintenance of drains, which permits ecological destruction, applying in reality to that water body? There's another second question here. How might Masterton's named springs and streams be scheduled and mapped so they can be effectively referenced and managed through urban intensification pressure or stormwater drainage practices? So we are intensifying our urban spaces. We currently pipe or marginalise our streams. How might they be scheduled so that that is managed? Is there potential for a policy that ascribes a restorative approach to urban streams that might have been piped underground? So I looked at other ways, if it's not in the natural character chapter, strategic ways in particular. Planners Note 104 discusses the possible inclusion of Te Mana o Te Wai strategy in terms of high-level direction to consider local water bodies, but then cites the removal of central government's requirement to recognise Te Mana o Te Wai or incorporate it in district plans. So I read it that the lack of requirement to incorporate Te Mana o Te Wai means, oh, we shouldn't do it anymore. But perhaps locally we can decide to do that. The planner also ascribes freshwater values as generally falling within the ambit of regional council responsibilities. So my question under that comment is, what's the potential for Wairarapa to incorporate Te Mana o Te Wai according to our own local values? And my second question is, can the regional council give effect to freshwater values for water bodies passing through town centres? Does the regional council get involved in our streams that pass through our town centre? This ambiguity of responsibility between district plan and regional council regarding our water bodies is frustratingly real for us citizens in the urban environment. So then I had a look at strategic direction and wondered if there's a potential approach to eco corridors in there. And I looked in the definitions chapter. We define infrastructure in there, and that comes straight from the RMA. All of infrastructure is simply defined as built stuff, not natural stuff. So my question is, what is the potential of defining ecological infrastructure or similar in the definitions chapter? If we define ecological infrastructure, perhaps we can then refer to it throughout our plan. Something we list as being valued in some way. So my second question there is, could this help us connect the natural with the built in our habitual thinking about town centres? So we, in our strategies, talk about incorporating natural values into the built environment. Could we talk about natural values in terms of infrastructure? And can that help us connect the natural and the built equally so that we're building both, regenerating both in our space? We can have our built environment and our natural environment both together, supporting one another. So then I thought, where else can I look in the strategic direction? There's the natural environment chapter. It describes ecological goals, including objectives for explicit typologies like coastal environments, like Wairarapa Moana. But none of its objectives refer to ecological development in town centres or urban form. So my question is, how might a natural environment objective explicitly refer to town centre zones or urban form development? We're not connecting the natural environment with our urban environment. We're seeing them as two separate entities, two separate spaces, two separate zones when they overlap. Then I looked at our urban form and development section of strategic direction. It contains a town centre objective, but it makes no reference to ecological infrastructure or human nature connectedness in our towns, in our town centres. So a question is, how might the objective listed in there, UFDO 5, vibrant town centre, I like that objective. How might that reference human nature connectedness? Second question, what's the potential for another one of the objectives, UFDO 4 infrastructure capacity, to include ecological infrastructure. So then I turned to where else I might find something that helped me understand how these streams might be managed in my place. I looked at the ecosystems and Indigenous biodiversity chapter. That also sits outside of strategic direction, but feels like it informs, or it falls out of our strategic direction. Yeah, it describes the value of Indigenous vegetation and habitats, which we know are encouraged along our riparian margins, which lead into town often. This chapter is amazing in that it's really strengthened in this proposed district plan, and really aligns beautifully with what I have found in locally expressed and locally adopted strategies. But there is no reference in to an appendices or a guide like the Centre's guide, no reference for what the specific vegetation of Masterton or Indigenous biodiversity of Masterton or the Wairarapa is. We have no reference to that. We keep saying it, no one knows what it is. We have no reference. So we have Centre's guides and industrial centres guides and things like that. We have no Indigenous biodiversity guide or appendices. We say what's a pest here, we don't say what belongs here. Okay, so a question for under this chapter is, how might an Indigenous biodiversity guide be supplied and explicitly referred to within the Centre's design guide or alongside it? We have very good sources of this information. It just isn't referred to in our district plan. We do have something referred to in our district plan, which is our for Masterton. Masterton, that's our street tree policy. That's the only place vegetation apart from pest vegetation is mentioned, and that's contains several species. So outdated, it contains species that are now on the invasive list. So yeah. Yeah, I will read this conclusion out. So something I've noticed over the last 2 years, I've spent 2 years studying our current plan and inserting myself in this plan review. And I've noticed that there's a general pull toward the innate ecological potential of Wairarapa's places. There is a chorus in all those submissions of similar submission voices. And I think that it has constituted a kind of vision. And I think that the needle has moved when I see this proposed district plan. It has moved really positively. But I also see that while a combined council's plan is efficient and effective, Whakaoriori Masterton's place specificity, and probably by extension the other places in Wairarapa, are deprioritised in this update. So we're not as specific about individual places, which are different to one another. The combined district plan seems to be encouraging us all to be generically the same, which I've noticed in the greater scheme of my work to be the condition across Aotearoa. You need to be careful to be place specific. That's why things like Indigenous biodiversity can and should relate to exactly your place, not just native stuff in this country. Okay, so so very few opportunities have been taken by Masterton District in particular to differentiate its specific values or update its specific parts of the schedules. They're very outdated in the case of Masterton. Masterton certainly doesn't use town centre zones chapter as aspirationally as it could to reflect its community's space-specific values, which are very well described and adopted in our Wellbeing Strategy 2018, for example. So one of the questions for hearings panel, I'm going to wind this up quickly. Is there a mechanism for councils to iteratively, this is an important one, is there a mechanism for individual councils to progress parts of our combined district plan after it is adopted and outside of the 10-year review? Is there a chance for that? Is there a mechanism for that? And how might Masterton District update its place-specific information in chapters, schedules, or appendices where their work is either outdated or new information is coming in? So these specifically refer to, are we going to do this every 10 years, or are we going to be able to, as we learn, incorporate new things, particularly into schedules?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The last one that I've just added on here that I have hand wrote out quickly is what role do the online maps play in the identification of features, so that objectives, policies, and rules actually apply to them? How important are the online maps to whether or not something is valued or managed? Are they indicative or are they definitive? And are the schedules the indicative or the definitive way that we ascribe management values to anything? I'm just going to unwind this. This is a map of Masterton's urban awa. This was produced by Tony Garstang, a citizen scientist, and has been seen around the place. You probably have seen it a few times. This is part of the motivation for through the streams at district plan. Yeah. So kia ora, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. There's a lot to unpack there. Two things I need to say is, firstly, the 13 questions or the 14 questions that you've posed are matters that will be addressed by the officers in their right of reply. And what they do, for me at least, is they test the linkages that exist between the strategic objectives, which we're dealing with largely today, and the chapter provisions. That's something that I know that Mr. Wesley will be looking at very carefully to make sure that those linkages are there. Secondly, a number of the references you made to the town centre zone, the eco zone, the natural character zone will be the subject of separate hearing streams. The officers have the advantage of hearing your concerns about them in advance of preparing their report, so that's very good. The right of reply from the council on these matters is due in the next 10 to 15 working days, and so that will be posted on the web page, and that will be something that we'll consider in our deliberations. Just check with anyone else to see whether there's any questions.
Let's take in.
No. Thank you for your comprehensive presentation. I'm not sure whether we'll see you in further hearing streams or not.
Yeah, it's I got a bit of a bridge across them, so I figured take my opportunity.
Well, you set the scene really nicely.
Kia ora.
And yep.
Yeah. Again, very much appreciate the process and the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Chris, you got it.
He hasn't provided.
It's not doing. Okay. Good morning, Miss Craig. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you, yep.
Lovely. Thank you. We can see you now. Thank you.
I'm just going to pre-warn you, I'm sick as and I have a child, so just bear with me as I go through this.
That's quite all right. Can you hear us all right? Good. But we're running a little bit late, but we'll carry on and hear your submission, and then we'll break for morning tea after that. Just for the benefit for anyone else who's online or listening. We're in your hands, Ms. Craig. Just before we do, Ms. Craig, Commissioner Hayes would like to just make a disclosure.
Yes, I would like to interest here, the co-chair of the Runanga o Wairarapa, Ms Craig has Rangitane under that.
Yeah.
Kia ora, Amber.
Kia ora. Ko te pū te more te we te aka te rea. Ko te waunui, te kune, te whē, te kore, te pō. Ki ngā tangata Māori ngā rangi rawa ko papa, ko tēnei te timatanga o te ao, ko tēnei te matatanga o te ao. Ko te manu e kai ana i te mero, nō nā tēnā here. Ko te manu e kai ana i te mātauranga, nō nā te ao. Ko Tararua te pai maunga, ko Wairarapa te moana, ko Romahanga raua, ko Waiohine na awa, ko Rangitane o Wairarapa raua, ko Kahananu ki Wairarapa na iwi, ko Ngāti Hamua rātou, ko Ngāti Moe, ko Ngāti Hikawera, ko Ngāti Kahukura āwhitia na hapu. Hurio no Ngātuiri, himi Mātia Hātaueki, Pūrākau Huki, ko Amber Craig taku ingoa, ko te rua tēnei, he te pauro taki whenua au mō Rangitane o Wairarapa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I have spared you from my singing this morning due to my sickness. But kia ora, my name is Amber Craig and I'm the pauro taki whenua for Rangitane o Wairarapa. I kōrero today with a karakia instead of a waiata that is taught to our babies at kohanga. It is usually a waiata that tells us the mātauranga of the stages of creation of us as tangata, as a people today. It is passed down through the generations, from the creation of our people to our babies today. This is one of many waiata, mōtiatia, and other forms of communication of our mātauranga. However, they are all intergenerational observations of our taiao, passed down and adapted over generations. This is mātauranga Māori. This waiata also talks to our whakapapa about who we are, that we descend from Ranginui and Papatuanuku. When our atua were separated by their tamariki, they mourn for each other. This is their gift to us, to Hurihanga Wai. This is the cycle of water as we know today, and in all forms, wai is a taonga. Because we look at this without mātauranga, or we without an integrated approach, as called it within councils, we only look at a fraction of the problem. We tend to only fix symptoms and not root causes. Papatuanuku for us is the embodiment of our taiao, our environment. Our moana is the heart, our awa is the veins, and our wai is the blood of Papatuanuku. You cannot look at one without the other. That is like treating a wound without understanding the underlying cause. Ai, te kia. The spiritual connections we have to our rivers, such as the Romahanga, the Waiohine, the Waiawangawanga, the Mangatariri, just as a few examples that you sit between right now, are immeasurable. All life comes from Papatuanuku, and we will return to her. When our wai is suffering, we as a people will suffer. When we look at our descendants of Rangitane o Wairarapa and the impacts colonization has had on our awa, our people, you can clearly see the detrimental effects. Our tupuna Hawani Te Whatahora Juri, who was a scholar from Wairarapa and who wrote in his manuscripts that our waterways were as waiu, or the breast milk that sustains us as people. That makes us think a little differently about how we look at our wai. That as someone who has tried to breastfeed her own tamariki, you need to eat well yourself and not be stressed out. If we take everything from Papatuanuku and no longer give back to her, if we keep stressing her out and if we don't nourish her, she will no longer sustain us. That is our whānau, hapu, iwi, but also your communities. The removal of Rangitane voice, stories, and mātauranga has seen us observing the degradation of our waterways, our whenua, and our people for the past 180 plus years. It has been heartbreaking, and although generations before us have fought to be heard, degradation has continued. My kaumātua have observed some of the biggest impacts to our taiao in their lifetime, and now we are picking up the challenge. Some examples of issues that have resulted in ongoing degradation of our waterways is ignoring or deprioritizing mātauranga Māori knowledge. Human and economic needs are consistently prioritized above the health of our waterways, water bodies, and taiao. Mana whenua have been alienated further from our taiao and unable to undertake our cultural practices. There has been a lack of integrated and holistic approaches and solutions for our wai at all levels, and that's governance, management, and operational, as well as a lack of mana whenua participation. Can you give me, sorry, 2 more taku here. As well as a lack of mana whenua participation in decision making on our taiao and freshwater at all levels, governance, management, and operational. We also, as referred to within all of our submissions, we have a mana mātauranga ahapu strategy, which starts to define aspects of Māori data sovereignty. Noting that mana mātauranga ahapu is our name for it, due to Māori data sovereignty being a word that was born out of the Crown-Māori relationship. Our role is that although mātauranga has been digitised and put into virtual spaces, we need to understand the whakapapa, the context of use, and uphold the mana of whose data it is. Nā atua, nā tipuna, nā tangata. Our tupuna were the original farmers. We are horticulturalists. Our tupuna grew gardens extensively throughout the lands. In fact, many of our rangatira were revered because they grew such gardens and could feed our people. We were the original transport. No one was left behind in Te Ao Māori. We uplifted our people to ensure we all had what we needed. We lived sustainably. We gave back to Papa Tuanuku as much as she gave to us. There is a role for our community, and we absolutely support that. And we support district councils collaborating with our communities. We know that has been done poorly in the past, and so we tautoko their voices to be engaged further. However, their role is as tangata tiriti, an important role no less. We come into this relationship with te tiriti o Waitangi. That is our role as tangata whenua. We're always striving for a return to tino rangatiratanga and mana motuhaki. While others may sit in this seat and ask you to prioritise their industry, they seek importance for their way. I would ask whose economic means they ask that. I want to remind you of whose economy has been discarded throughout the history. From 1886, our tupuna have protested you ignoring illegal activities of opening Onoki Spit, destroying our economy of tuna harvesting for the benefit of your economic projects. In 1947, our tupuna protested you draining our wetlands to see the benefit of your economic projects and the destruction of our economies and the ecosystems that supported it. The removal of harakeke raupo habitats for our tuna and the destruction of our whenua and the inability for our awa to breathe and move, to name a few. Early 20th century, our tupuna protested the building of stop banks to protect your economic projects and stop our awa from flooding, a natural occurrence that needs to flush out and renew herself. Late 1960s, our whānau protested the diversion of the Romahanga River to bypass Lake Wairarapa and flow directly into Lake Onoki to save the economy at the time from the floods. And as late as 2021, US stakeholders in the water resilience have proposed a dam for your economic means with little or to no engagement in including of mātauranga Māori. This is just a few examples of how our whānau have protested you changing our environment to protect your economic projects that destroy Papa Tuanuku. I guess we want to ask, when is enough enough? And when do you stop coming to this whare and telling you that things are not right? It would be great to be able to co-design and build from the beginning with communities involved. And I'll also remind you the complicit nature of which councils participated in these historic and important events that the government and yourselves have only just apologised for not more than a few months ago. Our mokopuna need us to continue to be brave so we can ensure we can take actions we need to now to reduce climate change and unpick the systemic issues that hold us back and quite frankly will kill us in the future. I'd like to finish off with the example of how mātauranga Māori can thrive within Aotearoa. Matariki that we just celebrated in the past month was a prime example of this. Some people have adapted and picked up matariki, but through Māori-led mātauranga, the core celebration is still kept safe for our people. So I want to finish with the story about how Ranginui and Papa Tuanuku were separated. Tāwhirimatia was so angry and devastated that he went to live with his father, and in his grief and sadness, he plucked out and crushed his eyes, throwing them to the sky to spread them over his father's chest and becoming the mata o te āriki tāwhirimatia, or otherwise known as matariki. This is the power of mātauranga Māori. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora.
Kia ora, Amber. Thank you for that presentation. I'll just see whether anyone has any questions of clarification. Joe or Ian? Nothing? Anyone on my list?
Yes.
Okay. Amber, the submission that was received by Rangatane supported the chapter on tangata whenua. In fact, that chapter was drafted by representatives of both Rangatane and Ngāti Kahunu. Mr. Wesley, who's stood on that chapter, has recommended some amendments to that chapter and also to the tangata whenua objective. Have you had an opportunity to consider any of those changes that Mr. Wesley's recommended?
I think having it in a bit of a collaborative discussion is better than just having our say on something where you guys recommend stuff, because it's really hard. When we first started this, it was in a co-design forum. We were all in one room, and then you have someone who, to be honest, no offense, Mr. Ensor or whoever it is, makes these recommendations, but out of context of talking to our whānau, especially as a tangata whenua chapter. So I would prefer if we came back together and discussed the feedback and then worked out what is best with our whānau in the room.
Okay, understood. Just for the record, it's not Mr. Ensor, he's the next submitter, who was Mr. Wesley.
Yeah, sorry, I realised that partway through, which is why I said or someone else.
Okay. Okay, that's all from me. I don't think we've got any further questions. Just check with the officers. Any questions of clarification through me? Thank you, Amber. I wish you speedy recovery. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, and we'll be back for other hearing topics in the
Yes,
future.
you will. Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you then.
Kia ora, Amber.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Ensor. We're running a little bit behind time. We're going to take the morning tea adjournment now for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and hear from you if that's okay. Do you have any time restrictions? Mr. Ensor, can you hear me?
Can you get him to unmute, because it's not wanting to do it here?
Mr. Ensor, you're on mute.
Can you send him a chat? Not due till 10:45.
Not working, he won't even see us.
Looks like you might have received something. Okay, we'll be back in 15 minutes for Fulton Hogan's submission. Thank you, everyone. Let's make that clock too.
Yeah, good on you.